Do you remember when I called the 2018 Six Nations a funny old tournament just because the defending champions lost to Scotland? Now, 6 months and one global lockdown later, we come back to finish a competition that started back when none of us had heard of Caleb Clark. Playing in an empty stadium meant Saracens away, and standing 2 metres apart to sing meant you in Westlife. However, Italy demonstrated some excellent social distancing as they let Ireland sear through to their try line for 50 whole points in a weird return to the 2020 Six Nations, as Will Connors and Hugo Keenan marked their first caps with tries, celebrated by the rocking sound of an empty 60,000-seater going bananas. So, what sense can we possibly make out of an odd occasion with a slightly too expectant scoreline? There have been some mixed reactions, shall we say, to Ireland's performance on Saturday and whether or not it will be enough to beat a fired-up French team in a lockdown Paris next week. But if you want my take, they were pretty good. Of all the new coaches coming in post-World Cup, Andy Farrell and Ireland look to have had the smoothest transition, perhaps because he's kind of doing the inverse to most of them and stripping things back. Whereas Ireland's shape and systems under Joe Schmidt were infamously complex and ever-evolving, Farrell has got his team playing to a set, very sensible structure. And then from there, once those were in place, allowed them some very liberating freedom to express themselves. The 1-3-2-2 pattern is strict. Anybody not following it is evidently taken to the hurt arena, but within that, the players are free to do whatever they like. The system's pretty simple. One forward stays out on the wing at all times. 3 group together on the closest 15-metre line, and then the other 4 are split into pairs and poke around. Sometimes they filter in off the backs, sometimes they're united in a pod, but in true secondary school fashion, they always need to know where their buddy is. And most of Ireland's tries came from playing within this system. Perhaps the best chance to see it across the whole game is in the lead up to Jungle Jim Sexton's try. Ireland play wide and set up this phase where only backs are involved, meaning all 8 forwards get to find their shape. Here, on the 50-metre line, are 3 of them, with Sex Wrangle stood behind to wrangle them. Burn carries, and the 3-man shape allows for very quick pull. This is then recycled to Jumping Jack Sexbed, who has the first 2 outside him here. He passes to Omani, who spreads it to the next man out the back, Robbie Henshaw. Italy's umbrella defence has a hole between the spindles as Maury has come up slightly too far. Henshaw heads into that hole, offloads to Keenan, who then finds the 1 from the 1-3-2-2, CJ Stander, out on the wing. He charges right into Big Jaden Hayward as the ball is again recycled quickly. And hey, look, in fear of a northern flavoured bollocking, the 3-man shape is already formed on the closest 15-metre line to the ruck. Murray selects which one is in the most space, Doris charges right through, up the line, and with the Italian defence scrambling all momentum with Ireland, it allows Juilliard Sex Queen to be his selfish twat self without any repercussion and score himself. Ireland are now a structure team rather than the system team they were under Schmidt, and this has allowed them a bit more freedom to play so openly, allowing for absolute highlights like this, where off turnover ball, Peter Omani draws one, then just as Canna turns to focus on him, Omani remembers that you can't punch someone whilst the ball is still in your hands, so athletically offloads to Bundy Arki so he can get into it on the floor with the 2 backs there. Arki can then step around and score, finish the try on 1 knee. Italy, however, are the exact opposite, and not just because Ireland actually scored some points. When you think of system teams, by which I mean teams where the game plan is more important than the personnel, where it's about just getting the right parts to click rather than anything special the athletes themselves can do, you tend to think of Leinster with their pinpoint passing rugby, or of Exeter, who have a very set process in the 22, or you think of Japan, who keep everything alive and open and under their control. You don't think of teams who play like Italy did on Saturday. And yet Italy are the most system-led and frankly kind of innovative and interesting team in this year and a half's Six Nations. The only problem is their system led to an absolute fault. The story of the game on Saturday was basically Ireland turned them over a lot. And whilst huge amounts of credit deserve to go to the likes of Will Connors, CJ Stander, Tyke Byrne, etc., a lot of it was simply Italy not protecting their own ball because they were too busy setting up for what comes next within their system. There was a consistent failure to do anything other than follow the plan on Saturday, and it's hugely frustrating because their continuous tiny errors are mounting up in such a way that it makes things look so much worse for Italy than they actually are. Here, Italy call a full line out, so all 8 Irish forwards are tied to this side of the pitch, then crash it up the middle using Carlo Canna. They use just the blindside winger and the prop at the tail of the line out to clear out knowing all the Irish Jackal threats are over on the touchline still. They then flash back to the blind side, where they could have created some space, except the pass to Cannone is into him rather than for him to run onto, meaning he can't take it and engage in the defence, and he then throws a pretty meh pass to Pelledri. If these two passes are crisp, Pelledri is able to put Negri away down the wing, and just watch scrum half Vaioli. He's beginning to run ahead to get in support, anticipating a break. Except because the two passes are pretty Pelledri just has to take it in on the wing. Italy try to run this move again in the second half, and it goes even worse. This lineout is a complete mess, and again Pelledri is forced to take contact. They still recycle, crash it up in the middle using Lazzaroni, but by the time they flash back to the touchline, the Irish line is fully set. However, they do recycle work a bit and manage to contract the Irish defence a tad. Except, Vaioli's pass isn't great. It forces Cescolari to duck for it, then Cescolari's pass is the same and forces Garbisi to jump for it. Each of these poor passes just takes half a second out of the attack and allows Tadhg Beirne to get right up in the fly-off's face and shut the whole move down. And this backline move, designed to hide Padovani, doesn't work at all because neither Canna nor Hayward sells their dummy line. The Irish defence know they're not threats, they're just ambling about. They put no doubt in the defender's mind, and they can hence just watch Padovani drift behind from one wing to the other and meet him and tackle him hard. It's especially difficult when you contrast it to how crisp Ireland were for Hugo Keenan's first try. It's really simple, but so effective when executed well. Justification Sexbear drifts around from the blind side where Italy already had two defenders just watching Andrew Conway. Garbisi, his opposite number, follows Sex Pringle and clogs up the defence on the short side. Italy then shuffle and readjust, Carlo Canna filling Garbisi's gap as the guard and making them a man short. Murray draws the first defender, and from there it's just numbers. A good pass by Henshaw allows Keenan to step inside Hayward, who really should do better, but who's counting? You know, it's a very simple but very well taken debut try. People keep talking about Italy as though they're an absolute shambles, but the Six Nations, they've been just two okay passers being good passers away from really testing and pushing the big teams. Frankly, I think new coach Franco Smith is doing a really encouraging job and taking a really bold approach. And I can see it potentially beginning to pay off soon. He's either just going to need to upskill his players to play the way he wants, or he's going to need to adapt the system's margin of error in order to get it working. We're talking about 4 or 5% here. That's all they are off clicking, but Tier 1 test matches these days are usually decided by 1 or 2%. The scorelines in this Six Nations show just how big a gap being 4 or 5% off your opposition is at this level. But this is so fixable, especially when they have players as exciting as debutant fly half Paolo Garbisi coming through. Garbisi started the year by playing a key role in Italy's under-20s, beating Wales away from home, and has absolutely kicked on since, being one of numerous standouts in that under-20s team, and then performing extremely well for Benetton since rugby resumed. Now, it's worth noting something. The match on Saturday was Paolo Garbisi's 15th game of senior rugby, and only his fourth fully professional match. And to slot in that well, that young, and then to score this try, I've spent the last year or so really banging on about what a genuinely class 10 Tommaso Allan has turned himself into, so after years of Kelly Harmonas filthying up the Six Nations, we could be finally looking at a world in which Italy have two properly test caliber 10s. Because, let's just look at that try. Italy stripped things back slightly for the final play and looked to begin playing a bit more conservatively, and it's working. This is probably their most consistent passage of the game. And here, before Garbisi takes the ball, Italy have a proper shape in place. Opposite them are two props, and they're both having to watch several runners rather than being able to make a decision early. Garbisi identifies this, and knowing he can round them, does that, goes straight through the gap. Then, oh my, he shapes the pass. Stockdale turns his hips, and knowing he's read him, Garbisi turns it into an audacious dummy, and is through under the post to give Italian fans everywhere hope that YouTube idiot isn't talking total shit about them not being that bad. Because even though this has been the maddest Six Nations on record, the odds on England losing to Italy for the first time ever are probably still a bit too long. Italy are looking beyond this tournament, and probably also beyond the one starting like a week after that. But game time will do them very well. They need it. They need match time preparation. Whilst Ireland have to prepare themselves to take on this year's team to beat, which admittedly Scotland have already done once. France, away, dans le Paris. Knowing a 4-try win will give them the title. There's one round, 3 games to go. and anything could yet happen. Now that's what I call a funny old Six Nations. Hello, thank you for watching that. Sorry for taking so long to get round to finishing the 4th round of the Six Nations, but that was out of my hands. I will be moving on to 2 more videos this week. That's the plan. So one on the Premiership final, as well as a quick wee bonus one on the really big upset that took place this weekend. That was the biggest upset of the year in international rugby. So we'll be covering that. I'll be covering the Premiership final. There's plenty more. I've covered every Six Nations game. If you want to remind yourself of what happened ahead of Super Saturday on this weekend, please do so. Please look around the channel, poke around. There's plenty more to see. And I will see you very soon for more rugby.
I think they'll try to play some rugby.